Good afternoon and welcome to the Three Rivers Podcast for Wednesday, June 12th. I am your host, Ed Troop. Glad you could join us here on Oneberg, on our Oneberg Facebook page, Oneberg YouTube, and on Spotify. Hope everybody's doing well out there. A lot to talk about this week, and joining me to discuss is our special guest, my good friend, mentor, former colleague, Bruce Sakalik from WJPA Radio, 95.3 FM in Washington. Bruce, great to see you. Good afternoon.
Good to see you, stranger. Yeah, nice to hear your voice.
It's been a while, and Bruce and I are going to talk Steelers. We're going to talk Pirates. We're going to talk baseball and football, of course. But got to start the top of the show that Bruce Sakalik, who's on your screen, is the reason why I got into broadcasting. I was
You're blaming me, okay?
Blaming you. Everybody's going to send all the hate mail to you. So look out.
I'm used to it.
Bruce and I started. I started with Bruce, I should say, back at 95.3 FM, WESA. Not 95.3, 98.3, right?
Yeah, just a little higher. Yeah, 98.3. Yep.
You came down to 95.3 from 98.
Yeah,
right?
It's a slow decline. Yeah.
But we started WSA in Charleroi, and for me with you, it was 1999, which long time ago, doing high school football on Friday nights in the Mon Valley. We covered Bell Vernon, Ringgold, Charleroi, Monessen on a routine basis. Man, that was a lot of fun back then.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and it was always fun to have someone like you. I remember when you came along, just a young guy, looking to get started in the business, and we always had a lot of fun doing the games, and obviously you learned from other people to get better, to get better. So, I think about those days often, and I have a lot of really fond memories. So.
Yeah, I was 19 years old, and just a quick story. We want to get into the meat and potatoes of the Mike Tomlin extension this week and the Pirates and what they're currently doing with their big three with Paul Skeens, Jared Jones, and Mitch Keller. But real quick, I got to tell this story right off the top. I'm 19 years old. I'm in college. I contact Bruce at WESA 98.3 in Charleroi there. And I said, hey, Bruce, would love to work with you, get some experience. Of course, he was great. He said, come on board. So we go to do our first game. It was Monessen Charleroi, which is a pretty big rivalry, especially back then. The winner, the bridge that connects the two communities across the Monongahela River, they name it either Monessen Charleroi or Charleroi Monessen. It's a bridge rivalry. And we're at Charleroi. We're getting ready to go on the air. Bruce is cool and collective, as he always is. And I'm sitting there nervous as can be. I'm shaking. We're about to go on the air. And the last song, and Bruce, this is what, 25 years, 26 years later almost. I still remember. It was Smooth by Santana. And you and Rob Thomas. And you were so cool, dancing, having a good time, just relaxed. And I could not have been more nervous. I'm looking over at you, and you're like, man, you're just getting ready to go. You're into the song. And I'm about ready to pass out.
I don't remember that. So obviously it didn't stand out to me, but I know with that, we've all been there. Anyone who's done this, that first broadcast, that first time, I remember mine very, very well. And you don't want to go back and listen to the tapes because you know how nervous you are. You can hear it in your own voice. Like other people may not pick up on, but you can hear it in your own voice. But yeah, we all know what that's like. But you obviously survived, and I know we had a lot of fun that year. And that the Charleroi Monessen game was always, as a youngster growing up in Bell Vernon, Charleroi Monessen was always sort of like the end of the season. That was like the last game, and then around that time, that was the first game. They would open the season and kind of change that game a little bit, I think. But yeah, I remember many Charleroi Monessen games, but I can tell you, I don't remember you being that nervous. So you must not have been that bad.
I pulled it off. We're gonna talk more Mon Valley sports and Bruce's broadcasted games for a long time. A little bit later on here in the program. But Bruce, I want to start out and get your opinion on the Pittsburgh Steelers and Mike Tomlin. Big news this past week. Coach Tomlin given a 3-year extension. Kind of controversial, but not shocked, not surprised by any means. Anybody in and around the Steelers organization in the last 6 months knew that this extension was coming, that it was going to get done right before the start of training camp. And perfect timing right here at the beginning of June. The Steelers ink Mike Tomlin for 3 more years. Again, not a losing season. Of course, that's the famous thing, right, throughout his coaching career. But want to get your opinion on the Mike Tomlin extension.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. I don't think anyone's surprised. I think we all knew it was coming. I think it does beg the question, and I think it's a legitimate question from the fan base and from media and everyone. Is it rewarding mediocrity? Yes, you can go back and say no losing seasons, but show me the postseason proof. Show me the playoff success that hasn't been there. And I think there's a right to question that. But ultimately, in the end, given the Rooneys, given the ownership of the Steelers, they like stability. They don't like to rock the boat. They don't like change, and they feel he's their guy. So as much as we might disagree with it, I mean, not surprising at all. And here's the thing: it's kind of like Mike Sullivan with the Penguins. I think they're both good coaches. I think Mike Tomlin's a good coach. I think Mike Sullivan's a good coach. I just think sometimes a change is needed. Sometimes a new face, or you hear it all the time in hockey, we need a new voice in the locker room, that type of thing. I think both apply, at least my opinion. I think both apply here. I think a new voice in the locker room at Acrisure Stadium and a new voice in the locker room at PPG Paints Arena, I think are needed. But obviously, they're not listening to me, and the ownership and the management of the Steelers and the Penguins believe that they have their guy. And I think they also subscribe to that theory of, okay, if not them, then who? And do you just want to go out and take your chance on some young up and coming guy? Or do you want to go out and get, especially in the NHL, go get a retread? These coaches that just seem to, get on the carousel and they're with one team this year and then 3 years they're somewhere else. So I think they've kind of bought into, we don't want to go down that path. So we'll just stay with what we know and who we like.
Yeah, there's some reports out there this morning. No financial terms on the Mike Tomlin extension, but it's supposed to be maybe close to the Andy Reid $100 million for 5 years that he got, which would be big money for Tomlin with this extension. But it's been one of those situations that the Steelers, flat out have not won a playoff game since 2016. Going on 8 years now. And that's kind of hard to believe. But that was the last playoff victory that they won when they made that run with Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown and got to the New England Patriots at the end in the AFC Championship game before losing to the Patriots that year. A lot of playoff losses since. And I sense that, the fan base is frustrated, but they're going to give it another season, right? I think after this year, if they can win a playoff game, I think that takes a lot of pressure off the whole Mike Tomlin discussion. But if they don't win a playoff game again this upcoming year, I think that seat's going to get hot again.
But what if they don't even make the playoffs?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, yeah. So and to kind of pigtail on kind of your point as well, to me, is haven't won a playoff game since then, but let's talk about the playoff games that they've played recently, including last year against Buffalo. Did anyone give the Steelers a chance? And in their last couple of playoff games, they've basically squeaked in or got in because of help from someone else. It's not like they locked up a playoff spot with 3 weeks left in the regular season. I mean, this was a team that was fighting, scratching, clawing, looking for help to get in. And then when they did get in, it was pretty much, barring an huge upset, it was pretty much the expected outcome, which was a loss. So yeah, making the playoffs, but you've got to win when you get there. And that's, I think, been the most disappointing thing for me, is that I don't remember the last time they played a playoff game and I thought, okay, they're the favorite here, that they should win this game. That hasn't been the case recently.
Yeah, there really hasn't been a close playoff game for the Steelers that you mentioned. I think going back to maybe the 2017 season against the Jaguars, a game in which they were expected to win and they lost, but it was a back and forth. I think that's the game, Ben Roethlisberger, ridiculous, 500 yards passing, 5 touchdowns, 4 interceptions or something. So you're right. It's been a while since they've played a competitive playoff game, let alone win one. But either way, the Steelers like consistency. Only 3 coaches, of course, going back to Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, now Mike Tomlin. And Tomlin's getting up there towards the Chuck Noll numbers. I mean, he's going into his 18th year coming up. This is starting to get towards that Chuck Noll number of being the Steelers' longest tenure head coach ever.
Well, and I think you can build on what you said, the hot seat that he may encounter. I mean, he has this extension now, but the hot seat he may encounter is, look at the changes they've made in personnel. They've made a huge change at quarterback. Russell Wilson, Justin Fields coming in. So the organization is showing that they want to make changes to get better. But ultimately, it comes down to the head coach. He's responsible. So again, if this team this season, what happens if the Steelers start 0-4? What if they're 0 and really that shouldn't be the case, because if you look at their schedule, it's not the beginning of the season that's going to be a nightmare. It's going to be the end of the season. So again, if they would get off to a shaky start after these changes with that extension, things could get to be a pressure cooker for Mike Tomlin.
Yeah, they have a brutal schedule to the Steelers down the stretch. As you mentioned, a lot of division games, a lot of weird scheduling. Thursday night, a Wednesday, of course, Christmas Day game against the Kansas City Chiefs at home. They're going to have to bounce back on short rest periods against a lot of divisional opponents in the AFC North. So, the more and more people are diving into that schedule, Bruce, they're getting a little bit more nervous about that streak of non-losing seasons for the Steelers. But Mike Tomlin is extended this week, 3 more years. And again, reportedly, Andy Reid type money towards that $100 million mark. No official numbers out there yet. Hey, Cam Hayward looking for an extension as well, Bruce, the long Steeler, 10-year defensive lineman. Was going to skip all of OTAs, but he showed up last week in good faith. Do you think the Steelers will get a contract done with Cam Hayward? And do you think it should get done?
I wish I had some inside information or was around it to give you like a really good feel. Just a personal take is, look, I think Cam Hayward's he's a great teammate. He's a player that you want around. The question is, with the injuries he's had, with the time he's been around, I don't know. I worry, and I hate to keep making these correlations between the Steelers and the Penguins, but I think they apply here. It's kind of like keeping that core of Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Chris Letang around. We love those guys, but you're kind of paying the price now. That I know you want to see them in those Penguin uniforms forever, but the nature of the business is you need to move on. You need to get younger. You need to get faster. And sometimes you have to say goodbye to players like that. So in Cam Hayward's case, I think, I would love to see him stick around, and I think he would be serviceable. And if he stays healthy, he should be good. But the question is, how much is he going to cost you? Is he going to give you a hometown discount? Or are you going to get a deal that doesn't cripple you or hinder your salary cap? So if you're asking me from a personal standpoint, great guy, think he's a good player. Yes, they should. But how much is that going to take? That's the biggest question.
Yeah, some decisions to be made for Cam Hayward. I expect the Steelers to get that extension done and bring him back in, at least for the next year or two. He says he wants to play 3 more years, so I guess it remains to be seen. The Steeler training camp dates are out. They will report in just a little bit over a month to Latrobe, to St. Vincent College. July 25th is the first practice, about 43 days away. 16 practices open to the public, 1 night practice at Latrobe. Their last practice will be August 14th, so it's about 3 weeks of training camp if you want to get up to Latrobe and check out the Steelers. Bruce, I know you're a hockey guy, so you mentioned the Penguins a few times in the opening part here about the Steelers. So let's talk about the Pens real quick before we get to the Buccos and what they're up to. The Penguins, another miss 2 years in a row now of the playoffs, something very uncommon for that franchise. You mentioned Sullivan. You mentioned the big 3 that they have getting up there in age. What's your solution for the Penguins going into this offseason and into next season to kind of correct the ship a little bit?
Well, got to get younger. You have to get younger. I love the guys that the holy trinity, if you will, of the Penguins. But I don't know. To me, I thought Malkin probably should have been gone a year ago, 2 years ago. I thought they should have moved on. He really seemed to show his age last year. Chris Letang, God bless. I mean, again, these are players I love. You cheered for many years, and he's battled countless health issues, and thankfully things worked out there. But again, I thought it was time to move on. I liked Kyle Dubas. I was really, really happy that they brought him in as the general manager. I still like that move. I just wonder if he's taking the team wholly in the direction he wants, or if he was kind of given an edict when he came here that we want this core to stay together and you're going to have to work around that. But I go back to the one thing I touched on earlier too, and that is Mike Sullivan. Again, I think if Mike Sullivan were fired by the Penguins today, he would have a job tomorrow, and he would probably be considered one of the top coaches in the NHL. So I'm not denying any of that. I'm not saying he's not a good coach. I'm not saying he can't get it done. I just think it needs to be done somewhere else. I think it's grown stale. I also think ultimately the head coach is responsible, and the power play that they have produced last season especially, but the last couple of years is just inexplicably. You can't explain how you can have this talent out there and not have a top five power play, a top 10 power
Right.
play. It's inexcusable. And I understand Todd Reardon's gone now. They did make that move, and he was in charge of the power play. Uh, but like I said, I just think ultimately you just need a different voice in that locker room. You need some different philosophies, maybe even a change in your approach offensively, defensively, what you do on the power play, get a little innovative with things. So ultimately, I think that move needs to be made, but we go back to sort of comparing it to the Mike Tomlin Steelers case is again, I think the organization sees it as this is our guy. Cal Dubas has wholeheartedly endorsed him and said he's not going anywhere. He thinks he's a great coach. So there's no indications of any sort of idea to change there. They're going to change the people around him. But I just don't know if that's going to change what needs to be changed to make the improvements. And let's be honest, the improvements they need to make are considerable. That's the biggest thing. It's not like they're a player away.
Right.
They've got bigger problems than that.
Do you think it's realistic to think that Sidney Crosby will get back to the Stanley Cup final and possibly win one before the end of his career one more time?
Maybe somewhere else, but no, we know that's not going to happen.
Right.
I mean, I hear those rumors. You know, I keep an eye on a lot of the Canadian media, and they love to talk about that. And you love to hear the different, you know, podcasters and various former NHLers who like to talk about this stuff. And you know, they're talking about, well, Crosby's wants out, he wants trade. That's not going to happen. They'll work out a deal. But to answer your question bluntly, no, I don't. I just think the clock ticking on Sid and the time it's going to take for them to get back the personnel and young players to develop, by that time, I think that window is closed.
It's unfortunate a player like Sidney Crosby that you can't build up later on in his career just a little bit, make one more run. But I agree with you. I think when they re-signed some of these older players the last few years, it finally just caught up with them, and it's hard to ride that ship now. You're kind of committed. So be interesting to see. Maybe at least get back to the playoffs, Bruce, and be competitive. Maybe win a playoff series later on in his career, hopefully. Who knows? You never know. Maybe the Penguins get back there. We are talking to Bruce Sakalik from WJPA Radio, 95.3 FM in Washington. Bruce does the morning news, anchors the morning news for WJPA, does a handful of other stuff for them as well. And he's sitting here today talking to us here on the Three Rivers podcast. Glad you could join us here this afternoon. Bruce, I want to transition over to baseball and talk about the Pirates. You know, good win last night at St. Louis, 0-0 score going into the ninth inning. Bucks get 2 in the top of the ninth. Bednar makes it a little bit interesting in the bottom of the ninth, gives up a leadoff home run, but gets it done. Pirates win 2-1. And interesting, I'm doing my show prep yesterday for you. I pulled the standings, and the Pirates are in last place. I go to update this morning. They're now in second place with that win. The NL Central is crazy right now. You got Milwaukee at 39-28. The Pirates are 32-34, 2 games under 500 and 6.5 back. But then after that, you got Cincinnati and the Cubs, both 32-35, 7 games out. And St. Louis, 31-34, also 7 games out. So the margin of error after the Milwaukee Brewers in this division is hardly anything. A win or loss each night either jumps you up to 2 or puts you in last place.
Yeah, interesting too. Right now, the Pirates they're tied with the Giants for the final wild card spot in the NL. So again, it's June. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves. But interestingly, for me, I will sound much more optimistic about the Pirates than I will the Steelers or the Penguins. So it kind of goes against what we're used to in recent years. But yeah, the thing that bothers me is you mentioned 2 games under 500, 6.5 back of the Brewers, but where would this team be if they hadn't given away? Think of the games this season that they've already given away.
Right.
That they should have, that a good major league team would have closed out. And I start to think, where would they be then? Would they be tied with the Brewers? Would they be a game back? Would they be a game ahead? I mean, so you start to think that way, but I think you have to be optimistic about this team. Paul Skeens is, I don't know if I've ever seen a pitcher for the Pirates in my lifetime that just looks to me to be so dominant. I don't recall any Pirates pitcher that I've seen that caused me to not in stuff, but AJ Burnett is a player that I see Skeens have a little bit of him in him, and he's only a rookie, so I think he's going to manage his emotions and keep them close to the vest. But I think of AJ Burnett on the mound and just being this highly anxious, motivated, and emotional player who kind of fed off of his own, firing himself up. And I see that in Skeens a little bit, and I think that's something we'll probably see more of as he gets more comfortable at the major league level. But I love that. And I think that's what everyone loves about this kid is he basically, and he said this in an interview, he basically comes out and says, "Here's my stuff, hit it, good luck."
Yep.
And I think as fans, you love a player like that, and especially when they can back it up. And then you throw Jared Jones into there. Mitch Keller, I've completely gone 180 degrees on him. I was his biggest critic just a few years ago. Thought that it was time to move on from him. So again, this shows you what I know. But I mean, he's settled in. You have 3 pitchers like that. That's a nice place to start, especially if you're talking about a short series in the playoffs, if you can get to the postseason. So again, I think there's a lot to like here. If they can go get a bat, if they could get a real first baseman, I would love to see them have a legitimate power hitting first baseman. But that's the other thing with the Pirates, though. We start to get excited, and then the wheels come off somewhere, or the offense all of a sudden can't score runs. So I'm kind of reserving my excitement a little bit with the Pirates.
Well, history has shown, right? Everything we've gone through,
Right.
Here with the Pirates in the last 30 plus years, has shown us to not be optimistic. You can be excited, but it's tough to be optimistic until they actually prove us. And speaking of winning playoff games, they've won a couple wild cards over the years, but as far as winning a playoff series beyond that, it has not happened for the Pirates since 1979. We were talking about that last week, that it's not only have the Pirates not won a World Series, they've not been to a World Series since 1979. But you mentioned the big 3. You got Skeens 3-0 on the season, Jones now 4-5, Keller's now up to 8-3. He's probably your all-star pick at this point. Skeens 46 strikeouts, 79 strikeouts for Jones, 74 for Keller. So combining those big 3, Bruce, how about this? 15-8 combined record, 199 strikeouts, and an ERA averaging 2.95. Man, oh man, are you exactly right? If you can get into a postseason series with those types of numbers, with those 3 pitchers, this could be the year, or even next year, looking ahead, that they could end that playoff drought.
Yeah, and you have to be encouraged as well because there's still a couple of young pitchers coming. They've stocked up on starting pitching. So and then you have to wonder, well, do those pieces of the puzzle become trade value? Do those potentially become going out and getting that power hitting first baseman? So again, I like where the organization is at. I just think they need to. I think everyone can identify where they have holes in the lineup, and they need to fill them. And the question is, will this ownership group allow that to happen? But like I said, it's been a while since I've been this optimistic about the team. And that's not to say I think they're going to the playoffs this year or win. I'm saying I like the direction they're headed. And with Skeens there and with this pitching, you should certainly be competitive if they're going to put those types of numbers up.
Yeah, trade deadline just a little bit over a month away after the All-Star break coming up next month. So if they're going to make a move, you'll try to hopefully see that happen. Right. Rowdy Torres at first base has been a big question mark, though, in the last week or two. he's starting to return a little bit back to what the Pirates need out of him. But still, that first base is definitely a big hole that they might look to make a move coming up here in the next month. We'll have to wait and see, but they might be able to make a run. I got to mention this, Bruce, too. Last week, Chapman's in the game, 104 miles per hour, the fastest ball thrown this year. This guy's 36 years old, and he threw over 100 and towards 104 multiple times last week at PNC Park. Just incredible to have that much steam on a pitch, especially at 36 years old.
Well, the thing about, it was not that long ago, just a couple of weeks ago, he really looked like he was lost. I mean, he just had no control. And he was kind of struggling. He was walking batters. But it seems like he figured something out. And he also seemed to me to get a little bit of an edge. There was the one game, I don't know if you saw it. I can't remember who they were playing, but he threw a pitch that got hit, and he thought it was a home run. And He actually threw his glove down on the mound, because I'm like, I don't know if I've ever seen a major league player do that, throw their glove down. But it ended up being a flyout. Well, then the funniest part of the whole situation was, I thought, when he got to the dugout, Andrew McCutchen was just making fun of him, which, those two have a pretty good history. Chapman hitting him years ago when he was with the Reds. But I like seeing that. See, I like to see players that show that emotion. I like to see them kind of fire themselves up. And I don't know, he seems like he's gotten back on track a little bit. And the stuff surprised me that I thought he might dial it back a little bit just to get more control. But maybe that's just, maybe he's wired differently. Maybe he just needs to uncork it and throw it as hard as he can, and that will help him kind of get a little more locked in.
Yeah, between Chapman getting back on track, Bednar, after that first month of the season, rough, and there's been a couple misses here or there, but for the most part, he's gotten his consistency back too. That Pirates bullpen getting a little bit stronger, getting back to where they need that to be as well. So I think it's going to be an exciting summer. If nothing else, at the beginning of the season, we talked about here on the podcast, Bruce, can the Pirates just keep us interested once Steeler training camp starts? And right now, I think the answer is yes. Between the three big pitchers we talked about and what they've done so far, they're only 2 games under 500. The NL Central, there's a lot of questions about this division not being as strong as it's been in years past. I think they do have our attention, and I think they will have our attention the rest of the summer. Even if they would happen to miss the playoffs, I think they're going to play competitive 500 baseball.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if those big three we're talking about can continue, obviously they're going to be in the mix. The question is, how are the Pirates going to handle Paul Skeens with pitch count, looking at his long-term future? And I think so many comparisons have been made, Skeens to Steven Strasburg.
Right.
And we know what happened to Steven Strasburg. And I think he has caused a lot of management people to kind of look at that book and say, we have to watch. And if you look, the only thing about Skeens that I've seen is he throws a lot of pitches. So that would be my only concern, is if he continues to pitch this well, that's great. But what happens if now you get down to that playoff push, you get towards the end of the regular season, and you look at his pitch count and go, okay, what do we do here? Are we going to have to pull a Strasburg and basically shut him down for a potential post? Like I said, that's the only thing I worry about, is his pitch count. But again, if those guys are going to put up these numbers, their offense, boy, they really struggled there for a while. But I think to a certain extent they may have figured some things out, whether they're taking a different approach and that's changed things. They seem to be a little bit better. They still strike out way too much for me. But I think the biggest question mark for any postseason run is going to be their offense. Can they produce the runs that they need to produce, given the pitching that they're going to get?
Well, they're just in the game 2, middle of a road trip. This road trip just started actually yesterday. Next 6 games on the road for the Pirates. And it's a key series at St. Louis, a place where they haven't really played all that well over the years. They got game 1 last night of that series, so that's big for them. And the next couple nights against St. Louis will be some key games here in June for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Hey, Bruce, have a few more minutes left with you. I want to talk a little bit about you personally. Outside of broadcasting with WJPA, you also officiate WPIAL basketball and umpire baseball over the years. How many years have you been doing that now in each sport?
This past season, basketball was 28. And I believe this past baseball season was 20, right around 20 or 21 for baseball.
And of course, you've called high school football for a good while too, going back to me and even before me, a lot of years before me, that I got involved with you back in the late '90s, and you continued that as well, for a little longer. But talk to me a little bit about this, the state of high school sports. You've seen it from an officiating standpoint as well. There's so much going on now. There's transfers. We talked about the Aliquippa thing several times here.
Right.
On the podcast, we've talked about Northern Columbia out east and what they've done, the Catholic versus private school debate. Well, there's a lot that you can talk about here, but what changes have you seen over the years, just from an officiating standpoint, with high school sports here locally?
The two sports are very different for me personally. And look, everyone has a different experience. Basketball for me has been the biggest change I see is, and actually this applies to both. We don't have enough officials. And unfortunately, we're getting ourselves caught into a bit of a snowball situation. And what I mean by that is we don't have enough officials right now. So what's happening is you're getting young officials, not necessarily by age, but you're getting young, experience-wise officials who are being thrust into varsity games. And to a certain extent, even down to the JV level, that look, when I started high school basketball almost 30 years ago, I didn't see a JV game until maybe 5 years in. Maybe, I can't remember for sure, but it wasn't my first year. It wasn't my second year. And it probably wasn't my third year. I was working elementary. I was working rec ball, and then slowly now, I mean, I'm going to games on the varsity level, and you're working with partners who are in their second year.
Wow.
Nothing against them, and many of them that I worked with did a good job, but you need to understand something. Second year, that's awfully tough to be working at the varsity level when you just don't have the games under your belt. You might be a good official, but there's so many things going through your mind when you're out there as a young official. You're trying to remember your mechanics. Where do I stand? How do I signal? Where do I go? What happens when we rotate? I mean, there's so many things. And then on top of that, you're trying to call the game as you see it. So it's not that easy. So where I'm going with all this is young officials being thrust in, then guess what happens? Maybe they get a call wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Now I've got an upset coach. Now I've got upset parents in the stands. And now he has to deal with the other big thing that a young official faces is, how do I handle the coach? How do I handle the fans? How do I handle that pressure on me that they're complaining about me, they're upset? Do I have to give them a technical foul? Should I give them a technical foul? So, this thing snowballs, and what ends up happening is the official quits.
Right.
Because he says, you know what, this isn't worth it. I don't want to come out here and listen to this and be called names and deal with that. And they quit. And then guess what happens? We start all over again. We just lost someone who had a year under their belt, maybe two. And now we have to start with, trying to get younger guys. And then more young guys get thrust in. So I don't know what the answer is. I think we're getting to the point, and I know this did happen last basketball season, where they were sending, at least in the chapter I'm in, they were sending officials to do both varsity games. They were going to play a girls game and then the boys game, or vice versa. But the same officiating crew was going to work both. So we're getting to that point. And I mean, the only thing I would say, and baseball, we're hurting for umpires. Baseball can be challenging because a lot of games are afternoon, 4:00 games, 4:30, sometimes
Right.
5. That's tough for a lot of people. Like for me, working early in the mornings, it's fine. I'm done by 11 noon. So me getting to baseball games is not a problem, but that's not the case. I think there's a lot of guys that would probably do baseball if they didn't have a work schedule that prevented it. So the biggest thing, and I would plead with people that go to high school events. I understand. I complain about officials. If my son would tell you, we watch NFL games together. I complain just like anybody. But I would just tell you this: when I go to a youth game, whether it's little league, middle school, JV, varsity, you know what? We're going to miss calls. We don't have instant replay. We're going to get things wrong. Lord knows I've I've missed calls. I've gotten rules wrong over my many years. It's happened on many occasions. But I will tell you this. The guys that I work with, the guys that I've known for many years, and even these guys are coming in, they're working hard. They're trying to learn. They're trying to get the experience that they need to do the job. And they're there to do the job fairly. So the next time that you want to berate the guy because, he missed that bang bang play at first base, at your local high school game, cut the guy a break. I cut look,
Right.
we're learning. Sometimes these things happen. And the other thing I would tell you is there's a lot of times too, people don't, there's rule differences from high school baseball to the major leagues, official baseball rules and such. So sometimes, you have to listen to this stuff. And I think I wish people would just kind of understand that we wear a uniform and go out there, but we're human beings. We have families. We're out there doing this, in my case, because I love sports. I want to be involved. Guys do it for that. They do it to make a couple extra bucks on the side. I would just beg people that if you want to keep having games scheduled the way they are, you're probably going to want to ease up a little bit, because the way we're going here, a lot of games are going to get canceled and a lot of games are going to get shifted around. And there may be games that they can't, maybe you don't have that JV team because we just don't have enough officials. So that's the biggest thing for me, is just we need more people, and we need to keep the people that do give it a shot. We need to keep them in it.
That's great advice and great feedback, and I can't agree with you more, Bruce. As you know, I've coached my sons, and I still do in their youth sports. My oldest is 13, been coaching him since he was 4, which is crazy. And my youngest, who's 10, has been on some very good competitive football, basketball, and baseball teams over the years. So I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I always joke with people that when, I'm on the back nine with my boys, it's going to be over quicker than how it started. You and I were talking about that a little bit with your son before, who just graduated from high school, before we came on the air. So, I'm almost done, but when I'm done, I think I'm going to do a whole podcast on the good, the bad, and the ugly of youth sports. There's a lot of it, and a lot of it comes down to, and I always tell my teams, I sent out an email before the start of each season. I said, look, it all starts with us coaches, because when we get upset, the kids feed off of us, and then the parents feed off the kids, and then the parents go crazy. So it ultimately starts with us as the coach. You got to kind of keep everybody calm. And a part of that is working with the officials. You have a question about a call, don't lose your mind. Pull them aside, ask them for an explanation, move on. And I also tell all my other fellow coaches as well, we're not going to change your decision as an official, right? You're the first, last, and only stop on a call, whether it's on the basketball court, the baseball field, or football field. We can question it, but we're only going to make the situation worse if we complain about it and start yelling and screaming. I wish more people would take that advice. I know sometimes, hey, look, I'm human. I get upset too on calls in different situations, but you're right. It's driving you guys, the good people of the game, out of it. So I can't agree with you more. I hope people are listening to this and take a page out of your book.
And I have great relationships with coaches. I mean, over all these years, and what I love is that when I work a game and you have a coach or a manager, whoever, they question a call, or they even become really upset and basically say, you missed it, you got the call wrong, is that when the game ends, and if by chance we run into each other headed to our vehicles after the game, or the next time I see you, it always means a lot when that coach will, and sometimes it doesn't need to be said. I have long-term relationships with some coaches. It doesn't even need to be said that, look, when the game's over, the game's over. It's not like I'm going to be mad at you and, hold it against you the next time you have one of my games. It's when the game's over, it's over, and we can shake hands, say, hey, take care. Hope your family's well. I'll see you next game. And I have that relationship with most coaches. And I think that's what you have to keep in mind when you have those rough games. When I have a bad game behind the plate and my strike zone's terrible, I know it. And when you tell me about it, I know it. But when the game's over, you can come over, and I've had it. They pat me on the shoulder and say, rough day. It's like, yeah, I did. I had a rough day. And you move on. And when you show up the next time, they're like, hey, good game today. Your strike zone was perfect. So that's what you're looking for, is that give and take, and that kind of understanding, coach to official, or even fan to official, understand what's going on here.
Bruce, we only have a few more minutes left with you here on the Three Rivers podcast, but I'm going to put you on the spot. You've been,
Oh, no.
refereeing, umpiring, if you will, and also broadcasting high school sports for a really long time. As have I. I'm up there 25 years now myself. And I always think back to myself in each sport, who is the greatest athlete that I've seen? And that's how I'm going to put you on the spot right now. Off the top of your head, tell me in each sport, football, basketball, and then baseball. We'll go in the order of the seasons, right? Who's the best athlete that you can think of that you've seen over the years?
Well, so you're saying best athlete. Daryl Harding at Charleroi years ago was a great athlete. I remember him vividly on the good Charleroi team. Boy, geez. I'll just share this with you. I'm not saying greatest athlete in football, but one of my favorite football players in all the high school games that I've called was Scott McClintock, who played at Bell Vernon. I've never seen a player like this. He went on to play at Michigan. Probably the most explosive, best defensive player I've ever seen. Watched him at a scrimmage one time, hit a kid this was at Jim Weir Stadium at a scrimmage on a Saturday. Hit him so hard, the pop of the pads was deafening. I loved to watch him play football. And real quick, he was playing in an adult baseball league. I ran into him several years ago and got to talk to him real quick. And he's a great guy as well. I'd never talked to him before, but one of my all-time favorite high school football players, Scott McClintock at Bell Vernon. Basketball-wise, saw a lot of good players. Chad Scott at Monessen, when I first went there, they won a PIAA state championship. Oh boy.
I was going to say, I remember on WESA, you called that Ringgold State Championship basketball team in the mid-90s,
yes.
right? That went to Hershey and won it. I still remember you talking about the Hershey kisses and stuff being thrown on. The court. I mean, these are just things that I definitely remember listening to you. And that the head coach of that team just passed away, I saw.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow. But those games were great. I mean, the Monessen state playoff runs and Ringgold, I was there for those. Those were fantastic. The game that got Ringgold to the state title, though, Zora Walsh hit a half court shot at Newcastle. If you've ever done a game at Newcastle, you're in the corner, and the ball was coming basically right at me, and watched it go in. And that was one of Yancey Taylor actually borrowed the tapes from me. Who Yancey went on and played at IUP. I think he played some overseas. But I don't know if I ever got those tapes back from Yancey. But that was one of my great calls, was the buzzer beater by Zara Walsh and they won that in overtime to go to the state championship. But gee, let me think. Baseball player? Oh, brother. I saw a couple of really good because I worked some college baseball. I worked some D2 baseball for a while, and I got to see some high school players that wanted to play in D2. Saw them there as well. Lapkowitz, one of the Lapkowitz boys at Carmichael's. I see he's a coach now. Joby. I was trying to think of his name, but there were a couple of those players. Man, you got me thinking baseball wise. I've seen some good players. Yeah.
It's tough when you start thinking. Like I know I always tell people in 25 years of broadcasting, especially when it comes to high school football, Steve Breston from Woodland Hills.
Oh yeah, I saw him. Yes,
the best. I mean, and I saw Terrell Pryor too at Jeanette, but and I actually saw Rivas at Aliquippa as well. But man, Steve Breston was just incredible. He was so fast for Woodland Hills. I remember him being down at AccuSure Stadium when it was Heinz Field and just tearing it up and returning kicks and everything else. So Preston's one that comes to mind for me. But yeah, it's, that's one of the cool things that you got to do and I got to do from broadcasting. You've got to officiate it too, which is even cooler. You get to see a lot of good athletes here in Western PA.
Yeah, I mean, it's a blessing, and it's always fun when you see those players that you've seen, at the high school level make it not only to college, but then some that have made it to the pros. I mean, so it's always kind of neat when you can say, hey, I'm that guy I'm watching on Sunday afternoon. I called one of his games when he played in high school. I remember him very well. So yeah, and there's a long list. And probably as soon as we get done with this, I'm going to think about 18 names that I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I didn't say that player or this player. So I'm sure they'll all come back to me once we get done.
Well, you can text them over to me, and I can post them here on our on our page and let people know. Bruce, thank you so much, man. I appreciate you coming on. We go way, way back. I have you to thank for all of this and what I've been able to do throughout my career. And much thanks, much love, man. Appreciate you. We got to make it happen. I don't know who we need to call, whether it's Don Rebel or Bob Gregg down there at WJPA. Somebody, we got to make a call. Before it's said and done with for both of us doing these games, we got to go to the beach, you and I, and broadcast
and do a game,
a Bell Vernon football game. But Bruce is a Bell Vernon guy. I am as well. We're both Point Park guys too. We got to. It's on my bucket list, man. We got to make that happen.
Okay, it sounds like a plan to me. I would love to do it. I would absolutely love to do it. It's been great to kind of reconnect with you, because as close as we live to each other. I think I saw you at a youth basketball game a couple of years ago down at Cannon Mac, but it's been too long. And in addition to doing a game, we need to just maybe go out and have a little dinner and maybe a drink or two.
Yeah, let's definitely do that, my friend. And Bruce can tell everybody he did not throw me out of that youth basketball game when he showed up the referee.
I did not. Behavior. No, you were good. You were good.
I was on good. I was going to go. Bruce rolled in. I think you were filling in that day. It was our end of the season tournament.
I think so, yeah.
I was like, man, what are you doing here? But I was on good behavior. I usually am. So thanks, Bruce. I appreciate it. Have a great summer. We'll get you back here on the podcast. Hopefully as we go into the fall, we'll talk more football, maybe some more high school football with you as well.
Sounds great. I appreciate it so much. Take care.
All right. Thank you, Bruce Sakalik from WJPA Radio, 95.3 FM in Washington. You can hear Bruce every morning on the morning show. He anchors the news on WJPA Radio. Definitely check it out here in the area. That's going to do it for our Three Rivers podcast. Hey, a programming note. We're off for the next 3 weeks. How about that? Going to be on vacation the next couple of weeks through the 4th of July as well. So our next show will be on Wednesday, July 10th. We're going to be off for the next 3 Wednesdays, but July 10th, we will return here on the Three Rivers podcast, where you can hear us here on our Facebook page on Oneberg, on our Oneberg YouTube channel, as well on Spotify. And we're going to be gearing up for Steeler training camp as well. We're hopefully going to be doing one of the Three Rivers podcasts live from St. Vincent during training camp there at the end of July, beginning of August. So stay tuned for that. That'll do it for our show for this week. Have a great week, everyone, and we'll see you in 3 weeks back on July 10th. Have a great day.